Today on the program, we discuss the Real ID Act. Congress passed the Real ID Act in 2005, enacting the 9/11 Commission's request that the federal government, quote, set standards for the issuance of sources of identification, such as driver's license. Has this act set new security standards, or is this simply a product of an overreaching government prying deeper into our personal lives? We will have activist Kaye Beach on to discuss the Real ID Act and the implications it has on our personal freedom. Also, in sports, the Oklahoma City Thunder trailed the Portland Trail Blazers Wednesday evening with a final score of 115 to 120. Today, Oklahoma City Thunder will be taking on the Sacramento Kings, so that means we will have sport contributors Justin Wright and Trey Shelton on the program to give us our Thunder update. But first, we welcome back to the program Representative Paul Wesselhoft. Paul, welcome back to Oklahoma Voice.
Yes, I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
We're glad that you're back in the studio, sitting in the co-host chair. We have a jam-packed show. And Paul, I was looking on the internet, and I saw that the Oklahoman had written a little article and calling you and Richard Morissette the political odd couple. And anyone that knows Richard Morissette knows that he is a staunch Democrat, and so many times you guys don't see eye to eye, but there is one thing you do see eye to eye on, and that is OU basketball.
Well, that's true. Richard and I have been friends. We came in together as legislators, and we go toe-to-toe on the floor of the House. And he's a liberal Democrat, and I'm a conservative Republican, so we rub each other pretty awfully sometimes. But when we leave the floor of the House of Representatives, we are the friends that we came in to be. And we've gone to a number of Thunder basketball games and OU football games. And here recently we went to the Final Four. So, yes, we're good friends. And quite frankly, people call us the political odd couple, but I think we present a good model. I don't know why these two parties cannot get along better. Obviously, that's what's not happening on the national level, and that's why we have so much gridlock in D.C. is because these people are not the friends that they used to be. They're so politically driven that it's hard for them to form bonds of friendship.
Mm-hmm. And see, it doesn't have to be odd at all. And, I know a lot of elected legislators that are friends with somebody on the opposite side of the aisle.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But we had a lot of fun going down to Houston. The ironic thing is the tickets that we were provided to us, actually we paid for them, but President David Boren made the tickets available to us. And so we drove down there, and unfortunately OU lost on Saturday, so we didn't stay around to Monday to watch the championship. But we got to watch the Final Four play on Saturday, and so we had a lot of fun. We stayed at my son's apartment, and Richard slept on the floor on an air mattress. And at one point, he started snoring, so I took my shoe and I popped him with it.
Hey!
And that brought the snoring to a halt, and so we were able to make it through the night.
All right. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a good report for the most part. And, you were talking about President David Boren, and we know that President Boren and you have somewhat been going at it in the sense of trying to get those paintings, then that artwork, back to its rightful owner. And transitioning into that, I couldn't help but notice on your Facebook page that you were working to propose a resolution in the Oklahoma House called the Holocaust Expropriated Art Recovery Act. And why don't you tell us the purpose of this resolution and why you're choosing to shed light on this issue?
Well, you probably know that we passed a resolution in the Oklahoma House of Representatives unanimously, and everybody became a co-author as well. And that resolution encouraged, actually cajoled the University of Oklahoma to do research on all of their art. So if they find out that art was stolen by the Nazis, that they would return it to the rightful owner. And I think that document, because when you pass a resolution on the House of Representatives, you're expressing the will, even though it's not a law, you're expressing the will of that body. So that body was telling President Boren We want you to do the right thing, do the research that you should do, and return the art. And I think that was the thing that really persuaded him eventually to stop fighting this in court and come to a settlement. And the very fortunate thing is this summer, probably close to the July 4th weekend, I'll be going to Paris accompanying that art and giving it to the rightful owner, Mrs. Meyer, in Paris. And so I'm very thrilled to be able to fly over and give that art to her.
Excellent. And before the show, we were talking about somebody else trying to pass an act like this, but I think you had already beat them to it. So you're kind of the front runner in this deal.
That's correct. Yes, we the U.S. Congress, I just heard on the news last night, matter of fact, Senator Cruz and Senator Schumer, talk about a political odd couple. They are the authors of this particular bill that you just mentioned. And the whole idea of that bill is to return stolen art, the Nazis stolen during World War II, to their rightful owners. So actually, we beat the U.S. Congress here in Oklahoma, but that's not the first time that we've passed things in Oklahoma that Congress has looked at us and said, that's a pretty good idea. Maybe we should do the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And here on Oklahoma Voice, we want to be able to continue this conversation about this art recovery and this particular act. And so Representative Wesselhoft will be back on the program more to kind of delve into this issue and perhaps have another guest. Could you tell us about that guest you're wanting to have on?
Yes, my colleague in this whole campaign has been, I've had two colleagues. One, former Representative Mike Reynolds, has been very instrumental. But the other one is a student at the University of Oklahoma. His name is Eric Sunby, and he founded an organization at OU that emphasizes to teach students, not to be anti-Semitic, to be sensitive to Jewish issues, and especially returning stolen art. So he's a very bright young man, and we'd love to have him on our show, and I look forward to that program.
Yes, we cannot wait to listen to him, and because it sounds like he's got a brilliant mind, and it'll be perfect for this conversation. I'm wanting to shift gears a little bit, and I'm wanting to talk about your drone bill, House Bill 2337. It was killed in the Oklahoma Senate, and I believe the chairman of the committee did not give your Senate author, Rob Standridge, a hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's Senator Barrington. He didn't even give the bill a hearing. I'm sure he got lobbied strongly by the Highway Patrol and other people that don't want any restrictions on drones. So unfortunately, the bill wasn't heard, and it dies this year. Maybe another representative will bring it up in a couple of years. I think it's very important. Frankly, I think Congress someday will come out with federal laws pertaining to drones. Let me just kind of create a little world for you for a moment so so our listeners will understand about drones. You have to realize that drones, if not now, will soon be ubiquitous. Now, that's a word that means everywhere, and they're going to be everywhere. You can buy a drone today for about $1,000. And you can put sophisticated equipment like photography on it. Matter of fact, my son, his hobby is photography, and he's going to buy a drone. The prices will come down in the near future, and a lot of people will have drones. I may even get one someday. And you have to realize that drones come in sizes anywhere from the size of a sparrow to a 747. Now, why do I say 747? Well, I was in Israel recently, and as a state representative, I got a tour of one of their military bases that has all kinds of drones on it. Now, they didn't show me the 747, but I have read that Israel has a drone, an unmanned aerial vehicle, 747. Now, what they're going to do with that, I don't know, but they have it. And so you have to realize that in the next 10 to 20 years, this is a new frontier. These drones are new. It's a new frontier. And of course, we see them utilized in our war efforts in the Middle East when they're weaponized. But I'm talking about for commercial use. I predict in the next 10 to 20 years, when it comes to like UPS delivering packages, you're not going to see pilots do that. Why would UPS hire a pilot, pay their insurance, their medical benefits, their retirement, their salary, when they can transport all that equipment with a drone? And that's what's going to happen. they're going to be pilotless UPS. So look for that. That's going to happen in the future. It might be 10 years out there. It may be 20. I'm not a young man anymore, but I think I'll see that in my lifetime. Now, as far as passenger flight, I don't think the human being is quite psychologically equipped to be on an aircraft without a pilot. Now, maybe in the next 50 years, when people are so conditioned to drones, maybe that'll be the case, but I don't think that's going to happen in the near future. Frankly, I don't want to be on an aircraft without a pilot. I'm just not psychologically prepared for that.
Yeah.
But when it comes to commerce, Jonathan, you're going to see that that's just going to happen, and so you're going to see drones everywhere. So that's the world we live in. But it's a new frontier without any laws, without any restrictions, other than the FAA recently came out with certain restrictions on how high they can fly, how fast they can fly, those kinds of safety issues. But there are no regulations to unmanned aerial vehicles as far as invading people's privacy. And that's what my bill did. My bill essentially said that if law enforcement is going to target you for surveillance, then they must suspect that you're going to commit a crime or have committed a crime or are about to commit a crime, in which case my bill requires of them to get a warrant to surveil you. And we have a judge that's on call 24 hours a day. They rotate the duty. They're on call to issue warrants, so it's not even difficult. And even if the police needed to get to a location and surveil somebody immediately, they could do that in my bill, but then they would have 48 hours to get back to the judge and explain why they did not have the time to get a warrant. So my bill was very generous, and all it did was lay out groundwork for the law enforcement, how they are going to conduct themselves when they're surveilling people. And this is a constitutional issue with me. In the Fourth Amendment, of the Constitution says the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches shall not be violated. And then it goes on to say that no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. So if I'm being surveilled and I'm an innocent citizen, I haven't done anything wrong, and if they're spying on me, then they are breaking the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. So my bill was the strongest Fourth Amendment bill that's probably been presented in the last several years. And unfortunately, it wasn't given a hearing.
And I believe even in your post, you say that your bill was generous enough that the law enforcement could perform a drone surveillance in an emergency without a warrant, and then in 48 hours explain and support their reasoning to a judge.
That's correct. That's correct. And let me make a comment about legislators not hearing bills. I am one of two legislators in the House that hear every bill that comes into my committee. We give every bill a hearing, and we vote it up or down. And sometimes I'm against the bill that I'm hearing, and I debate against it. And this session, I've actually killed one of my Republican colleagues' bill in the committee because I debated against it, and I won the debate, and more people voted against the bill than for it. Frankly, I think that's how you should conduct a committee. But think about this. When I, in the House, if I refuse to hear one of my colleagues' bills, Republican colleague, or even Democrat, what I'm basically telling that person is I have better judgment than you do that your bill should get a hearing. Now, take that up a step, and when you refuse to hear a bill that was passed in the other chamber, then it's not one-on-one. The chairman is basically telling the other legislator, I'm not going to hear your bill, even though it was passed in the Senate, because I have better judgment than all those senators over there that passed that bill. To me, that is the height of arrogance, and it's abuse of power. And that's one of my frustrations in the last 12 years is these chairmen that are so brilliant that they know better about your bill than you do, even though it passes out of a chamber, and they don't give it an up or down vote. Quite frankly, sometimes they don't even want to go on record in the committee as voting for a particular bill, so they won't even hear it. So that's just one of my frustrations I wanted to kind of get out there. But I think in the future someone will probably pick this bill up. And frankly, I think Congress at some point, U.S. Congress, will have to come out with some regulations. Think of another angle on these drones, Jonathan. If you're an attorney and you're fighting for your client, say for child custody, do you think you're not going to use a drone to surveil the spouse to see what the spouse is up to?
Sure.
I mean, there's just all kinds of ramifications on how drones can be utilized and surveil people. And right now, there are no rules. There's no regulations. And that's all my bill was asking to do. But unfortunately, it didn't get a hearing in the Senate. But perhaps it'll come up in a couple of years by another author.
My question is, when something like that does happen, isn't there a certain percentage of votes that could somewhat resurrect that bill or bring it back to be heard?
Not if it's not given a hearing in the other chamber. Now, in the chamber that I'm a member of in the House, if a committee chairman refuses to hear my bill, then I could do a petition and get, I think it's like 67 votes or 67 signatures that would force the bill out of the committee and onto the floor. But that's quite an ordeal to try to get 67 votes just to get a bill heard. And frankly, I just don't think it's fair. It's just so anti-democratic to me that we would have to go through those kind of hoops just to have a bill heard. It's just so easy. Just hear the bill, debate it, and vote it up or down. If it's not a good bill, then vote against it. It just seems so simple to me. But unfortunately, myself and maybe two other legislators are the only ones that give every bill a hearing.
Well, we appreciate that, and we appreciate you laying this groundwork. It's unfortunate that it did not get heard, but our hopes is that somebody will, as you say, pick this up and run with it in the future.
I certainly hope so.
Folks, switching topics, we're going to discuss a little about the Real ID Act. And we have a guest that we have decided to call, and her name is Kaye Beach. She has been an activist, and she has been speaking loudly against the Real ID Act, and she has some good ideas on which direction we need to go as a state and as a nation to defend our own personal freedom. Kaye, are you there?
I am. How are you doing, Jonathan?
We are excellent, Kaye, and we have Representative Paul Wesselhoft here with us as well. And Representative, would you please kind of set the stage for us so we can understand what this Real ID Act is?
Yes, the Real ID Act is at our legislature at this point. It passed out of the Senate. It came over to a committee in Appropriations and Budget, of which I'm a member. I voted against it, but more people voted for it. So now it's headed to the floor of the House. If it passes on the floor, then it's sent to the governor. I'm not sure where the governor is on this, but she's not a constitutional conservative, so I suspect that she might pass it. You might keep in mind the Real ID Act came out of Congress, I think, in 2005. And basically, there are about 20 states that have refused to implement the Real ID. And I think it's an intrusion of government. When you read the Constitution, when you look at the 10th Amendment, it says the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution are reserved to the states respectively. Well, there's nothing in the Constitution that I see that tells me that the federal government has the power and authority to force the states to come up with another identification card. And their abuse of power is that if you don't have this card, then they're going to tell you, I think in 2018, that you can't fly out of Will Rogers Airport to some other state. They're going to refuse to let you go on board. Now, Jonathan, this is not television, this is radio, so I'm taking out my identifications out of my billfold. And Kaye, you ought to be interested in this. First, I have the driver's license, and Kaye will talk about that. Mm-hmm. And we are told it's one of the most secured driver's licenses in the United States. It has a chip in it. It's biometric, so it's very, very secure. In 2018, that will not get me on an airplane. I also have here my concealed weapon license with my picture. It's official. That won't get me on the plane in 2018, the federal government tells me. Then I have another official document here with my picture on it, which shows I'm a member of the House of Representatives. That won't get me on a plane. I'm a citizen of the Potawatomi Nation. I'm a Native American, and we are a sovereign tribe, and they issue a permit, a identification with my picture. That will not get me on the plane. It'll get me on the plane right now, but in 2018, the federal government says that won't work. Last identification here, I'm a retired military officer, so I have a United States Uniformed Services identification card. This is probably a lot more secure than my driver's license. This is a very sensitive card. If I should lose this, I'm actually in trouble. That's got my picture on it. So, Jonathan, I took out of my billfold 5 official identifications, IDs, all with my photos on it. And in 2018, the federal government's going to tell me, no, you need a 6th ID. You need a real ID. And if you don't have it, we're not going to let you fly. And I just think that's abuse of power, and it's overreach by the federal government. And I'd sure like to have Kaye's thoughts on that as well. And you might keep in mind that Kaye was, she refused at one point to actually even get a driver's license because of its invasion. This real ID is even more so an invasion of her privacy.
And as you said earlier, Paul, there's nothing in this Constitution that says that we have to do this, and that is how we call it an overreach. So, Kaye, in about the 5 minutes that we have, can you please enlighten us on this subject?
Well, let me see. First of all, you're both absolutely correct. The issuance of driver's license and ID card is absolutely a state function. The federal government cannot force the states to do anything different with it, and it's important for people to know that Real ID is not a mandate. And all of the threats that Representative Wesselhoft was talking about, that you're not going to be able to fly after a certain date if you don't have a certain ID, that is an example of the stick. They've used the carrot and the stick to get states to accept this, and that is because they cannot force the states to do it. However, we are really close. I agree with Representative Wesselhoft. The way it looks now, this is going to pass, and I'm going to go back to my original purpose as an activist, going back to about 2007. Real ID is a problem. Biometric ID is a bigger problem. It is the worst problem. And we talked about this earlier on the phone, Jonathan, that our driver's license are currently, they require our biometric data, and people know they require their finger to be scanned, but they also require a biometric photo, which is not the same as a regular photo.
Right.
This photo can be used through digital means to identify you from a distance without your knowledge or consent. A whole different ballgame than a photo. So the biometric ID, to me, is the worst thing, and Representative Wesselhoff is right. I refuse to have a biometric ID. Introducing our bodies into the identity equation when we're not criminals or suspects is a huge mistake. Most people aren't aware that they have a biometric identification under the state driver's license or ID. And by the time they become aware, I'm afraid that it's going to be too late because it's going to start affecting their lives adversely. As I told you earlier, Jonathan, that the federal government has a big plans for these state databases. And under Real ID, these databases must be networked in together and that information shared. And the big plans include things like requiring you to have a Real ID and using your biometric photo as your passport to work for a living. You would have to be approved by the federal government to work. This was actually in the immigration reform bill. Mind you, 95% of the people in the United States are citizens, and you cannot say that something is a right if you have to have permission to exercise it. Mm-hmm. And if working for a living is not a right, I don't know what is. So my biggest concern is about the biometric ID, and I have refused it. I think that's the only thing that's going to stop it is people refusing it. But like I said, most people don't even know that that's happening. And the fact of the matter is that all states are capturing biometric photos, and at least 38 states, last time I checked, are actively using that photo for facial recognition purposes. That's a fact.
And Kaye, what's been the repercussions on your life refusing this license? Has the government come after you on this?
No, but I can't drive. I can't. I had a great deal of trouble just picking up my prescriptions because apparently there's a rule that you have to have a government-issued photo ID, which means a biometric ID. So, in essence, I'm having to trade my biometrics to pick up my medicine. I mean, silly things like writing out a check and showing my ID in my neighborhood association so that my daughter can swim there, get a membership to swim there. I don't have an ID. And so I've learned to cope with it, and I can cope with it now. But if we go ahead and agree to Real ID and unloose the state's biometric databases to be used and shared widely, that's going to change. I will probably have a much more difficult time functioning. And I think that people will find out what control is really about. And the problem with the biometric, I know this is an unfamiliar topic to most people. People understand how the Social Security number was a concern because you've got a unique number that's linking all of these other sources of data about you, which makes your life very transparent to the government. Well, your biometric is even a more unique number, and you cannot divorce yourself from your body. And so this puts your life in a state of transparency to the government that is untenable if you really think about it.
Well, Kaye, that has been very interesting, and we thank you so much for coming on and sharing this with us. Unfortunately, we are out of time for this particular segment, but we would love for you to be able to come back on and to give us an update on this and to keep us informed on this subject.
Well, thank you very much. I would be very pleased to do so, and thank you for inviting me. And Representative Wesselhoft, good to hear your voice, and I hope you both have a great night.
Thank you, Kaye.
We appreciate it, Kaye. And folks, last but most certainly not least, we have Justin Wright from thunderoped.com joining us, and he will be giving us our weekly Oklahoma City Thunder update. As I said before, we lost to the Portland Trailblazers Wednesday evening, and we'll be taking on the Sacramento Kings today. So, Justin, welcome back to Oklahoma Voice, and give us a rundown.
Well, honestly, I think it's over an 82-game season. You start to get a little burnt out. I'm not going to lie, I'm a little burnt out myself. I'm just ready for the playoffs to get here. Luckily, we've already clinched that spot, so not that big of a deal, just kind of waiting until next Saturday. What it looks like is going to come down the stretch here. We've got Memphis currently at the 5 and Portland at the 6. You don't really want to play Portland if you're the Oklahoma City Thunder. They match up a little bit better. And given the injury situation that the Grizzlies have had this season, it seems like the more favorable matchup. But obviously, that's not in the Thunder's control, so we'll just kind of see what happens in those games. And ultimately, this team has to be ready to play. They rested 4 starters against the Portland Trailblazers, only lost by 5. Got to see a lot of the bench and what the bench can do, especially what Enes Kanter can do when he has the ball in his hands more. Obviously, if he doesn't get the playing time he needs, he's not going to be as effective. But something moving into the playoffs, and especially as matchups dictate, let's see how much Enes Kanter can really do when he's got the ball in his hands, especially in crunch time. I think he could be one of the X factors, especially on a team where there are 3 players in the top 10 in PER, something that hasn't been done ever. No team has ever had 2 players in the top 10 in the PER. Oklahoma City has 3 with Westbrook, Durant, and Enes Kanter. This team certainly has the firepower. Where does the defense step up in the big moments to win games?
All right. Well, Justin, can you give us your Twitter handle one more time for us?
Yes, it's at ThunderTie, exactly what it sounds like, ThunderTie.
All right, Justin. Hey, thank you so much. We're going to be keeping our eyes peeled, and we're going to be keeping our fingers crossed.
All right, thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Okay, we appreciate it, Justin. And Representative Wesselhoft, we thank you so much again for joining Oklahoma Voice, and we look forward to you coming back on so we can discuss more about this art.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I want to encourage listeners to contact their House of Representative member, and encourage them not to vote for the Real ID Act, which will be on the floor probably next week or the week after.
Excellent. So do not vote for the Real ID Act. Contact your legislators, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for listening to Oklahoma Voice. I am Jonathan Clour. Good night.